Here is a little preview of the mandala we are going to be painting today. If you guys could do me a huge favor, if you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up. If you don't already, please subscribe to my YouTube channel and please share this video on social media or with anyone you think might find it helpful. And if you decide to make this creation, please tag me on social media at Thoughtful Dots. Hey guys, welcome back to another mandala painting tutorial. Today we are going to be painting on a 10-inch piece of wood. I got this wood on Amazon, and all of the tools that I'll be going through really quickly can be found in my Amazon shop, which I'll leave a link in the description of the video to make it easy. That can also be found by going to my website, which is thoughtfuldots.com, and then click on the Tools I Use tab, and that will take you directly to my Amazon shop where you can find all the links for most of the products that I use. So these are just blank wood rounds. I'm not sure exactly how thick they are, but they're not too thin. I have some other smaller ones that are thinner and they just warp like crazy. These ones are a little bit more sturdy. They don't warp a ton. But yeah, these are 10 inches. I have already painted this black using Folk Art Multi-Surface Satin in pure black. And I painted this last night in preparation for this tutorial today. When doing the base coat, I'm not sure about many other types of paint because I've just used this specific brand and type for so long, but when using the Folk Art Multi-Surface paint, I like to paint my base at night just to give it all night to completely dry before painting on it. Sometimes if you use this black paint and then say you wait like a couple hours, it might feel dry, but sometimes it's just a little tacky still in some areas. And when that happens, it's really hard to get the pencil to show up. Also, something else I've noticed with this is I just do one thin layer. It has really good coverage, so that's really all it needs. But if I were to do 2 layers, it's a little too thick, and then I have that same issue of the pencil not showing up. So that's just if you're using this Folk Art Multi-Surface. Other brands might be different. I prefer to use a multi-surface for the base because multi-surface is made to be a little bit more durable. It's made to stick to a bunch of different types of surfaces. So that's why I prefer to use a multi-surface for our base coat. So I've already painted this black, and I'm just gonna go through really quickly some of the tools that we'll be using. I will be using a 12-point mandala stencil. Again, this can be found in my Amazon shop. It comes in a set. It comes with the 12-point, a 16-point, and then a couple other smaller ones. But if you guys are painting along with me often, I would definitely recommend getting the set that's in my Amazon shop that has the 16-point and the 12-point mandala stencils because I use those every time. Okay, so we'll be using that stencil, and then I'll be drawing on the guide marks using this Brusarth, Brusarth, that's the brand, white charcoal pencil. This goes on really nicely, but most importantly, it wipes off so easy. Okay, and then I will also be using this compass to draw on some guide marks as well. So I'll be using this nail stylus tool set. I will leave a link in the description of the video with a size chart for my specific dotting tools so you can see which color is exactly what size, and then you can use that to convert to whatever set of stylus tools that you are using. I will also be using these dotting rods by Happy Dotting Company that have the millimeter size right on the handle. Again, if you plan on painting along with me pretty often, I would recommend investing in some of these tools. It's just will make it easier for you to know the numbers that I'm using, and will just make it overall easier to follow along with my tutorials. So I have that set. And then we will be using some brushes. These are US Art Supply brushes. Unfortunately, these are currently sold out. I've reached out to the company to see if they plan to restock. I haven't heard anything back yet. But for this size, I think we'll just stick with like a medium size. I do also have the longer bristle brush, which we may or may not use, but you can pretty much make any size that you have. I typically like to go for the like medium brush, not too long, not too thick, just like kind of in the middle. This size works really well for these like medium sized surfaces. So just whatever brushes you have, we can try to make work. So those are the tools that I will be using, and then we will just go through colors really quickly. So we're going to be doing a gray and white palette. So I already used these colors on a large mandala. I painted, I think it was a 24-inch mandala. If you guys follow me on social media, you might have seen that, or I think I posted a short here on YouTube of it finished. But pretty much just this gray palette. It's almost like a ombre, like a gradient. And I didn't have any black deco art, so I actually used this folk art multi-surface in pure black, but you can use whatever type of black paint you have will work okay for this. So basically I just filled the paint pots. These extra large paint pots are from Hobby Lobby. You can find these if you just Google XL paint pots, Hobby Lobby. They'll typically just pop up. I also have some Amazon dupes, so some fairly large paint pots in my Amazon shop if you don't have a Hobby Lobby. But what I did is I just filled these with black and then added in some white. So pretty much just more black on these ones and then more white on these ones. So you're just getting that gradient effect. So we're going from dark to light. And it's okay if yours don't look exactly like mine. Since it's monochrome type palette, it's okay if they're a little bit different. It will still look good. And this one's pretty dark, so I don't think I used this one much. So pretty much we'll just be using these ones. But to make this easy, since mine are already mixed up, I think I'll just mark these. Oops, that's a weird 6. So just know that we are using 6 colors, and 1 is the darkest and 6 is the lightest. So pretty easy palette because we're really only using 2 colors, and then I have a little bit of white, just plain white that I keep in this pot here. So that is our gray palette. The all gray looks really pretty on a black background. I love this palette a lot. Okay, I'm still just having my coffee. It's morning. I woke up with a really terrible headache this morning. So I'm actually really excited to just relax and paint with you today. Okay, so first we need to find the center, and I think I'll do it a little bit differently today. I'm just going to take this stencil, again, another very unconventional way, but I am just looking, I'm eyeballing to, I don't know if you can see like these little ends. I'm just making sure that they are looking about the same size on each end. And we just need a starting point. So we're just eyeballing an approximate center. We just need a starting point. So I'm just gonna mark right there. And then I'm going to take my compass. Tighten them. And then what we're gonna do is we're gonna put the pointy end on that approximate center we found. And then I'm gonna bring this white pencil all the way out to the edge. And then I'm going to flip it around all the way out to the edge. And we just wanna make sure that it's hitting on the same spot. So on this side, it goes over the edge a little bit, and on this side it doesn't. So then we know that it just needs to be moved over a teeny tiny bit. So now it's hitting right on the edge on both sides. So I did top and bottom. Now I'm just gonna go over here. So it pretty much, that center that we found was pretty much spot on. So now I just am taking the pencil all the way around and making a line. That way we can just kind of check our work and make sure that it's hitting at about the same spot all the way around. And honestly, I don't think it's gonna get much better than that. So I just like to make a little hole. So that approximate was pretty spot on. So there's our center. I don't like to make that process complicated. So I just pretty much eyeball. Okay, so then we're gonna take our stencil. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, just making sure. And we are putting it right over that center that we made. And then just taking a chalk pencil or charcoal pencil, and then I like to hold it down. So we are just drawing out those 12 vertical guide marks. And then I just like to take, there's a Lazy Susan under here, so I'm just going to take it off for a sec because it's wobbling around. And then I'm just lining this up, and I'm going to extend those guide marks all the way out to the edge. And this is the same exact process that I use for my large mandalas. So even up to my 36-inch mandalas, this is the same process that I use for drawing guide marks. I use the same stencil, so same small stencil, and then I just use a ruler to extend it out. And I actually have this 61-inch that I use for my larger mandalas. So it's the same process for large mandalas. You just use a little bit bigger tools. So bigger ruler, and then also this is my small compass, and this is my large one that I use for my bigger mandalas. If you guys are interested in painting large mandalas, I have now 2 courses that you can purchase that will teach you in the same style of my tutorials. It will teach you how to paint a 20-inch mandala. and I currently have 2 different patterns to choose from, but people have really been loving those. It's perfect for whenever you're ready to take the leap from painting small mandalas to larger ones. Okay, so now we have our vertical guide marks. So to make this easier for you guys to follow along, if you have this stencil, we're just gonna pop it back over the center there. And we are just gonna make one set of the circle guide marks. So with this, I don't like all the little gaps in between. I like it to be a solid circle. And I also like to add in more guide marks than are currently here. So it's just easier for me to do it this way and then to use the compass to draw them out. So might actually be easier, not all the Lazy Susan. So we're gonna put that in the center, and then we're gonna put our pencil on that first guide mark that we just made. Sometimes it's a little bit harder to get these smaller circles, so you kind of have to like lay it more down. So we're going to the next line. And I will measure these just for people who might not have the same stencil. So about 1 centimeter. It's okay if yours are a little bit different than mine. So I just made 2 more marks. And now, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And now we're gonna go back in between each guide mark that we just made. Oops. Sometimes it comes off the center there. So we are pretty much going to double. Oops, it came off the center again. Sometimes we really have to push that. I like to make a hole in the center because we will be covering it with our center dots, so it's okay if there's a little bit of a hole. So we are just doubling our amount of guide marks. This is a little bit bigger of a gap, so I'm just gonna add 2 there, a little bit smaller. Again, it's okay if yours are a little bit different size than mine. And I just like to blow off any excess. And then I am putting a Lazy Susan back underneath. That is a 10-inch Lazy Susan that's also in my Amazon shop. Okay, so we're gonna get started. I am just picking out, excuse me, which size we want for the center dot. I prefer a larger center dot. So 14 is a pretty good size. And I just like to make sure the edges don't have any really chunky paint, because that'll make our dot a little uneven. So we are gonna start with, for the center, we'll actually go from light to dark. I feel like when there's a gradient like this, if you start with the light color and go dark, it kind of gives like a glowing effect in the center. So that's what we'll do. We'll start with the lightest color. And the 14 dotting rod. And I dip my paint pretty deep in there, and I like to lift it up and look underneath and just make sure there's paint that's kind of like dripping off. So you want a lot of paint on the tool. And then we are just going to go right over that center. And this wood that I'm using is it's just a little bit more rough than the kind that I usually use. So that center dot is not perfectly circular, but we can work with it. So I'm just wiping off the tool. And you could also use silver in this palette, would look really good. I might add some silver in later, some accents. Okay. So now we're gonna go to the number 5. So we're just gonna go in order from light to dark. I'm going to use the large end of the yellow dotting or nail stylus tool. And we are just going to make our first row of dots. So we just are going to place one right next to the other, going all the way around that center dot. And we just want to get them close to one another without touching, and then close to the center dot without touching. And I can zoom in a little bit for you guys. So with these, I've tried different methods. Some people like to go north, south, east, west, like make one dot and then little dots in between, but it just never works out for me. So this method might be a little less like calculated or exact, but it's the only way I found that works for me. So I don't count these, we're just gonna fit as many as we can. Try to keep them all the same size. If you notice that they're getting bigger and bigger, you can just wipe off your tool, because sometimes the paint starts to build up, and that will make your dots bigger. So then I'm just kind of looking to see about how many dots I can fit there. I think 3. Perfect. So next we're going to go up to the number 4. So we just used this end, so I want to go up a little bit in size. That looks almost the same size, so I don't know if that'll work. So let's try the large end of the white tool. So we just want to go up in size a little bit. And since the spacing on that row looks pretty good, we can now go in between each dot from the previous row. If your spacing on the previous row is a little bit off, then if you go in between each dot on the next row, it'll be off as well because it's building off of the previous row. So if your spacing is not so great on the previous row, then instead of going in between each dot, you can just start a completely new row and not worry about going in between each dot from the previous row. But my spacing seemed to be okay. So now we're going in between each dot from the first row. Okay, there's our second. So we want to go up a little bit in size. So I'm going to go up to the large end of the blue tool. I just have a little bit of paint on there I'm picking off. And we'll go to the number 3. And same thing. We're just going to go in between each dot. And you just want to progressively go up in size with your tool, or else there will be more gaps. They'll be spaced a little bit further apart if you were to stay with the same size tool. So in order to fill in the gaps, each row we just go up in size a little bit. Okay. And so I'm just looking at this next guide mark, the next circular, and I can see there's more space over here than there is over here. That just means that the center dot was off a little bit. So we're gonna have to slowly start moving our pattern a little bit this way to eventually even out. Not ready to do that yet because these circles need to be all in between one another, but as we start building the pattern out, I will tell you when I start moving it over to this side a little bit. So we're gonna do one more row of dots, and I'm gonna use the number 2, and I'm gonna go up in size to the large end of the green tool. And we're just gonna do the same thing, dotting in between. So these ones have a little bit of a gap in between, which is totally fine, because on the outer row, I like to do little micro dots. So once this outer row dries a little bit, we're gonna go back in between and just put some little teeny tiny dots, and that will fill in that little gap. Okay. Not bad. Okay, so we are gonna do some swooshes. I want to do more swooshes in this pattern. So we are done with the ring of dots, and we are now gonna go back to our lightest color. So again, the spacing is not terrible. I said it was a little bit off center. It's a little bit further this direction. So these dots are a little bit further over that circular guide mark than these ones. I don't know if you can tell, but the last ring of dots is placed over that circular guide mark on this side, and then over here they're below it. So my pattern's a little bit further this way. But next we're gonna do some swooshes, and I'm just gonna have them all start at the same circular guide mark. So that should even out the uneven pattern there if we start them all in the same spot. So they'll be a little bit shorter on this side, but really you won't be able to tell much. It's a very small correction. So we're gonna do some swooshes, and I'm just trying to think of the length. I'm gonna do these ones a little bit shorter. So we're gonna start, so basically there's 1 guide mark, 2, 3. So we're gonna start our swoosh on this 3rd guide mark, and I'm gonna place it on the guide mark. So I'm using the large end of the green tool to make the dot, and then I'm flipping the tool over and dragging down. And we're gonna do the same here. So we're skipping every other guide mark. So we will have 6 swooshes. just wiping the tool off. And we are gonna go to the number 5, so the next lightest. Same tool, so large end of the green tool. And we're gonna do the same thing. We're just gonna make these ones slightly shorter, so they're going in like that little nook right there. And then we're flipping the tool over. And dragging the paint down. Okay, so now that we have our swooshes all starting on the same guide mark, even though our center dot was slightly over this way, now these all started on the same guide mark, so they've kind of evened themselves out now. So now, moving forward, it'll all be straightened out and everything will be the same length. So now we're going to number 4. And we are going to do the same thing. So same large end of the green tool. And it's just gonna have a little tiny tail. And you wanna make sure that there's not paint buildup because it is such a tiny tail. We want this to be clean so that we can get just that little, doesn't have a far distance to travel. So we want that nice point. And we are just dragging these ones from the very, you don't want to pull from the middle of the dot because there's too much paint there. And these are just traveling such a short distance that you can just pull from the very bottom of the dot to make a nice little tail. So there we have our swooshes. And now we're gonna do some brush strokes. So I'm just gonna grab this 2/0. I'm gonna get it wet. And I'm just thinking about what color I wanna do. I think I'm gonna do the medium number 5. So not the darkest one, but, or lightest one, but the second lightest. And when we're doing our brush strokes, there's this, I'll call these petal patterns, or we'll call them swoosh patterns. There's a swoosh here, and then right going down the center of the 2 is this guide mark. So next, when we do our brush strokes, we just want our brush stroke to stay on either side, on either right or left side of this guide mark. So I'm pushing down and I'm kind of coming out and then up to a tip, and we're gonna have them end on the same guide mark. So thicker on the bottom, letting up on the pressure towards the tip, and I'm kind of like coming outward. I want this to look like a nice flower petal. So really pushing down, bringing that out and then up into a tip. So coming like outward, there's a nice curve there. So curving and then up. And they're all ending on the same guide mark. So by bringing them out a little bit, we're getting like a shorter type of petal. Kind of wide. And I think that looks really pretty. Has that traditional mandala shape. Very pretty. Okay, I'm just gonna rinse off my brush and just kind of think of where we want to go from here. I'm gonna do some of the traditional petals with the walking the dots, but I'm gonna start them. So all of these petals end on this circular guide mark here. So when I start the next pattern, I'm gonna start it on that same guide mark. So let's think. I wanna go probably start with the darkest and go to light. And I'm just thinking of what size tool I want to use next. I might do a little bit of a bigger pattern here. Just 1 second. I just like to test out the different tools. I'm going to use the size 8. And so there's this petal here and this petal here. So our next petal I'm going to do in between each of those. So instead of going right above them, I'm going to go in between. So size 8 and number 2 paint. And dotting right above. So these petals end on this guide mark. So I'm starting my next dot right above that guide mark. So we just want to keep everything in line. So again, skipping every other. And I will use the white. So I'm gonna grab the white. And I'm gonna use the large end of the yellow stylus tool. And we are just going to make a dot at the tip, and the first dot is on this vertical guide mark. And then we are just going to walk the dots down the side of the circle. And you will do that same thing on every circle going all the way around your mandala. So this white really pops. And since this is our first time incorporating white into this pattern, there's no white in the center here. So to me, it kind of feels a little off balance. So what I'm going to do is once this dries, I might add a white dot, a top dot on the center dot, and then I'm also gonna do those little micro dots in between there with white. So that will kind of tie some white into the center there. And these walking the dots, we're just ending on that guide mark as well. So we're ending on the guide mark where we started the dot. So you just want every pattern to start and stop on the same guide mark. So I also want to add some, so there's like this empty space right here. You could do like a swoosh in there, or we could do some dots. I think I'll do some white dots. So there's this circular guide mark here and this one here. So I'm gonna make a dot in the center of this guide mark and this guide mark. I'm gonna make one right in the center, and then I'm gonna walk the dots out towards the tip of the petal. So I'll use the large end of the yellow tool. So making a dot in the center, and then walking them out to the tip of the petal. Like so. So in the center of those two guide marks, and then walking it out to the tip. And we're just gonna do that all the way around. Very pretty. Okay. And maybe now we'll go back and do those little micro dots. So I'm going to use the small end of the yellow tool, and we are going to add some, I like to dot on the outside and then on the inside. So that might be a little big. I want a tool that's a little bit smaller. So I'm gonna actually use this micro dotting tool. This is from Pebbles and Me on Etsy. Just this like curved micro dotting tool. If you don't have this, you can use the small end of the yellow tool or the small end of the pink tool. And we are just going to do some little micro dots. These ones are a little small right here. There's our little micro dots. This is pretty so far. Okay, so that dot was number 2. So now we're just gonna kind of go in the gradient. So we will go to number 3. And I'm gonna use the large end of the white tool. And we are going to make a dot. Instead of making it right next to the previous white one, we're gonna go up a little bit higher. So there's a little gap in between the white and the gray dot, and that will just give us more of a peak. So then when we do the next one, we're doing it right up against the white. So it just gives us more of a peak in our petal pattern. It's a lot of peas. But you can see just by placing that one up a little bit higher, it gives us a nice peak. If you do it right up against the previous white one, it'll have more of a rounded pattern, which is totally fine. I just kind of prefer that nice peak. So you'll just do that, walk the dots on each petal pattern all the way around. right, we are gonna go up in size, and we're going to the number 4. So I'm gonna go up to the large end of the blue tool. This is kind of funny looking at the screen. It looks like there's when my hands aren't there, it looks like there's a gray filter, black and white filter. Okay, large end of the blue tool and the number 4 color. We're gonna do the same thing. We're gonna bring it up a little bit higher just to maintain that nice peak. And then walk the dots downward. Okay, so I'm just looking at the spacing. I want to do brush strokes, double brush strokes. So I'm just looking at the spacing here. You could either do one more set of walking the dots that will fill in a little more space here and then do thinner brush strokes, or we can keep the pattern that we have, stop here with the walking the dots, move to our brush strokes, but do really thick brush strokes to fill in the space here. And that's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna do some nice thick brush strokes. So I actually think I will use the longer bristle. So this is the number 1 US Art Supply. If you don't have this brush, feel free to use any that you have. I'm using the longer bristle. It's also thicker, so that will give us nice thick brush strokes, which is what we want to fill in that gap. If you have a brush that makes thinner brush strokes, then I would recommend maybe just adding one more set of walking the dots. And I'm going to do, so either the lightest gray or white. I almost think white would look good here just to really give it that pop. So I am putting my brush pretty deep in there. I want these to be nice and thick, so I want a good amount of paint. Oh, actually, I want to do a brush stroke and then some little accent dots, and the accent dots really look good in white, so I am, sorry about that, I'm not going to do white for the next brush stroke. I'm going to do the lightest gray, so the number 6. You'll see what I mean when we get there. So just trying to think a couple steps ahead. So we're using the lightest gray. And getting some really thick brush strokes here. So pushing down and then lightening up towards the tip. So So just keeping in mind, we need to fill this space in between each petal. So I want these, I'm just kind of eyeballing that space, but then also remembering we have to still have one more brush stroke after this one. So we want enough space there for another brush stroke. And each brush stroke starts and stops on the same guide mark. Okay, I'm just rinsing my brush off. And we are now going to take the white and the large end of the white tool. We're gonna do those little accent dots I was telling you about. So I really love to do these accent dots with white. I feel like it just really stands out and makes it pop. So if we would have done the last brush strokes in white, then we would have had to do these dots in like a gray color and they wouldn't pop as much. So I always try to do these little accent dots in either white or the lightest color in the palette. Okay. And just thinking of what brush stroke I want to do next. I think if we did 5, it's a little too similar to the previous brush strokes. We want a little more of a contrast. So I think 4 will be good. So I'm gonna use the same brush. Just gonna get it wet and then wipe it off. Okay. So just remember, we want to try to keep our brush stroke on either side of this vertical guide mark that's going through. I might actually have to move to a smaller brush to make them a little bit thinner to fit there, but I'm just gonna try this. I can also just get less paint on this brush and it will naturally make them a little bit thinner. So just keeping it on either side of that guide mark, and that will make sure that we have enough space for both. If you guys are still struggling with brush strokes, I do have a course that I created that focuses all on brush strokes. So it goes through like paint consistency. I go through and test different types of brushes so you can see how different types of brushes make different sizes and shapes, and then it goes through a full brushstroke tutorial. So if you are still struggling with brushstrokes, you might be interested in that course. I'll link all of my courses in the description of the video. Hand placement is also really important, and I go over that in that course too. And pressure. Pressure is really important. And I just want these to be close to one another here, but I don't want them to actually touch. I like to make sure there's a little bit of black showing in between each petal so that it's not all blurring together. Gorgeous. Really happy with this so far. So what do we want to do next? So we can do a couple things. Yeah, I think we'll do a swoosh pattern. So all of these brush strokes end about on this guide mark. So that's where we're gonna start. Well, it actually needs to go a little higher. So all of our brush strokes end on this guide mark. So I'm gonna start our swoosh on the one right above it. What color? I'm gonna use, we'll actually do the number 2. And so I'm going to the guide mark that's above where our petals ended. So we want these swooshes to be slightly longer than the petals. So I'm going underneath this guide mark. So I'm using the large end of the green tool and then the small end of the green tool to drag it down. It's probably kind of hard to see that color on the camera because it's pretty dark. But we're dotting on the vertical guide mark that's going in between each petal. And then dragging down. Okay, so now we have all of our swooshes. Again, I know it's kind of hard to see. That's what they look like. And now we're gonna outline them with white, and that will help the color. It'll help them pop a little bit more so they're not getting lost in that black background. So I'm actually going to take the large end of the white tool and the white, and again, I'm going to make the dot slightly higher than our swoosh. So I'm leaving a little gap in between the swoosh like we did on the petals here. So we want a peak. We're gonna be walking the dots down along the swoosh but I want a peak, so I'm putting this white dot a little bit higher than the swoosh. You'll see in the next part. And then I'm gonna use the small end of the white tool. And we are going to walk the dots down. So by bringing that white dot up a little bit higher, it gives us a more elongated petal and more of a peak. Instead of creating a round shape, it gives us more of that petal look. All right. And next we're gonna do some brush strokes. I'm not gonna use that large brush again. I want a slightly smaller one. So I'm gonna use the 2/0, and I'm just getting it wet. And we are gonna do some brush strokes. So I'm gonna start them at the top and then go smaller towards the bottom. And I'm gonna start them, this petal ends on this guide mark, and I'm gonna start the brush strokes on the next guide mark up. So the one right above. So it's a little bit taller. And we are gonna go to the number 3, and then we're gonna do our brush strokes in a gradient. So I like to just kind of eyeball to see about how many I think I can fit here. I'd say about 4 or 5. So we'll just start here and go lighter. And then if we need to add one more, we can do white. So starting with the number 3, and we are starting at the guide mark right above, we're doing pressure, and then coming down into a peak, and we do it thicker, and we're kind of curving around and then curving down into a point. So just making sure that each brush stroke is starting on the same guide mark. Just rinsing off the brush. And our next brush strokes, we're gonna just go down the line from dark to light. So we'll do number 4. These ones, I'm gonna go slightly shorter. So I'm gonna go down to the next guide mark, next shortest, and have all of my brush strokes start at that same guide mark. we're going close to the previous brush stroke, but not actually touching it because we don't want the paint to run together. And if you want nice, plump, thick brush strokes, you got to get a lot of paint on the brush. Okay, rinsing the brush off. And then we're gonna go to the next lightest, which is the number 5. And we are going to do the same thing. We're just gonna make these ones slightly shorter. So I just really mix the paint or the brush in the paint a few times because every time I dip it, more is getting like sticking to the brush. So that will make it nice and thick. So we will definitely have room for at least 2 more brush strokes after this. So we will add the white at the end. Just rinsing off the brush. And yes, so we'll try to fit 2 more brush strokes. So we'll do the lightest gray and then we'll finish with the white. So again, I want these to be nice and thick. So I keep dipping it in, and I dip my brush. It's all the way past the brush into the metal part. So I want a lot of paint on there to make sure these are nice and thick. Okay, Rinsing off the brush, and then we will do our last brush stroke in white. Just gonna add a little bit more. And there's gonna be a little bit, let's see. I could even go up to a thicker brush here, that might help, but we'll try this. I'm just getting a lot of paint on the brush. So there's gonna be a little bit of a gap. I'm bringing the brush stroke to this vertical guide mark here. We're gonna do that on each side, and so it will be extended out a little bit. So I'm bringing it to this circular guide mark, that's the length. And then we're gonna get it right close to this vertical guide mark. So just a little bit elongated. So these ones are longer than the previous. We're just getting that nice curve. Okay, it's looking pretty. I'm just rinsing off my brush. And then, so these all end on this guide mark. So we have this little gap right here where we can put a swoosh. So I'm gonna try the large end of the green tool, see if we have enough space. And I want it to start below this guide mark. So large end dot, small end drag. There's a little bit of paint on that small end, so I'm just gonna get that off. And then use the small end to do, it's a little bit of a tight squeeze there. A dot and drag. So that one's large, and then we're just gonna do a couple thinner ones right alongside. So using the large end of the green tool, make a dot right in between this pattern and this pattern. It's on that vertical guide mark. And then flip it over and use the small end to drag down. And you might need to wipe the tool off to get nice thin on the next ones, because we want them nice and thin in that little gap. So there's a lot of white out here. The white really makes everything pop. I love it so much. But I think once this center dot dries, if we do a excuse me, a smaller white dot on top, I think that will really tie in all the white together. My throat is always so dry. I think it's just talking. Okay, so now we can do our final pattern. I want to do more swooshes. I really like this pattern here. So I think we will do more of those, but I think we should start with, let's see. Okay, so I'm going to do the same type of swoosh pattern we did here with the brush strokes. So I want to, I build the pattern based on how much space we have left. So I'm gonna start our swoosh about here and go downward, and then that will give us enough space for a brush stroke or maybe 2 brush strokes. So we're just kind of like eyeballing the space there. I think I'm gonna start with, so you either start with the swoosh going light to dark or dark to light. And I think light to dark will look better. So I'm gonna start with white actually. So I'm just gonna line them up on the same guide mark. Your guide marks might be a little different, so you just wanna leave, there's about 1, 2 guide mark space here. And we're gonna dot on every vertical guide mark, so 12. Dotting with the large end of the green tool, and then flipping it over and using the small end to drag. This is also a good time to mention, if you guys enjoy these tutorials and want more of them, I have more videos over on Patreon. And those ones are actually recorded live. We do them almost every Saturday at 9 a.m. Mountain Standard Time. So I provide a link a day or 2 before Saturday, so before the live stream, and I let everyone know what size surface we're going to be painting on and the palette, so that people can actually join me and paint along with me on live stream, which is so fun. Some people just come and ask questions, because you can ask questions live, or basically just like painting together. And if you can't make it live, then you can watch all the replays. So if you join Patreon today, you can actually go back and watch all of the past live stream tutorials. So that's kind of fun. That's been really fun. So I'll leave a link in the description of the video for that. And I also, if you guys see all my large mandalas that I post on social media, I post all of my color palette recipes on Patreon as well. So you're basically getting like a live workshop every week plus all of my color palette recipes. It's truly a great value in my opinion. It's like $10 a month and you get so much good content. Okay, so we just did white. So now we're just gonna go to the next lightest color. So that's the 6. Same tool, so we're using the large end of the green. And we're just gonna make these slightly shorter. And then flip it over and drag the tool down. Patreon is also just a great way to support me in general. I do these free videos on YouTube, but don't really make much money from it. So Patreon is like way where people can pay a small monthly fee, and that honestly helps support me as a full-time artist so that I can continue to provide these tutorials for you guys. So it's also just a good way to support me while also getting amazing content to enjoy. The value there is incredible. So those live streams, basically, like, you know how people do in-person workshops at like your local craft store or wherever you can go attend an in-person class. That's pretty much what we do every Saturday on Patreon. I'm pretty much doing a live workshop for you guys every week. And you get to access that full library of all past tutorials, which is so cool. So yeah, just like to mention that. I'll leave links and everything in the description. This gray looks so pretty. I never thought I would like a seemingly boring and bland color palette so much, but it actually, especially with the white, it's like very striking and beautiful. Silver would look really good. I might go back and add some silver. I haven't decided yet. Silver accents might look really good. All right. And we'll go to the next lightest, and I'm just trying to think ahead. We can fit, we'll just do one more. Or the next darkest, I guess it's going darker. So we will just do 3 swooshes for this pattern here. gonna do some brush strokes. And I'm gonna use that 2/0, so just like the medium size, and get that wet. And I'm just thinking of the colors I wanna do. So I think I'll do the same. I'll do the lightest, so the number 6. And for this, you can either start the brush strokes on this guide mark or bring it down to start at this swoosh, which I think is what I'll do. Yeah, I think so. It'll give us a little bit of a different shape. Let's see. No, I'm gonna start on this guide mark. So here, and we're gonna do that same. We're gonna bring it out pretty wide and then up. So these are gonna be like, they're gonna look like they got smushed a little. So really curving, extending them out. Black space in between. So yeah, they just look like they're smushed a little. And we're just leaving enough room at the tip because we are gonna do one more brush stroke. So we are just like improvising and building a pattern that's gonna fit in this space. So we don't have enough room to do the little accent dots that I normally do, so we just have to improvise. And I think I want to use white. And yeah, we just need to fill in the gap here. So let's see, I need to do one and just test it out. So that gives us enough room for another one right next to it. So I'm leaving like a little bit of a gap in between. I feel like that black kind of looks cool. So we're basically just building our pattern out to fit in the space that we have to work with. So these are just like more short and fat, like short and wide, more than normal, but it actually looks really cool. And we're just bringing the brush stroke all the way to the edge of the wood board. And when you have all of the brush strokes start on the same guide mark, it gives it this like 3D effect. Looks like it's popping out. So that actually looks really cool. So yeah, we just made the brush strokes come out a little bit more to fill in the gap here, and that just made them a little bit shorter and wider, but ended up looking really neat. So now, like I said, all of the brush strokes start on the same guide mark, so it leaves this black space, which looks cool. It makes it look a little 3D. You can leave it like that, but I like to fill it a little bit. So I'm going to take the large end of the blue tool, and we are just going to dot on either side of this white swoosh right here, and just walk the dots all the way out. You can use a smaller tool if you want these a little more dainty, but I kind of like that. right, I'm gonna zoom this out just a tad. It looks so good. So now we just have to figure out what we want to do out here. Ooh. I think I will just do another little swoosh pattern because I like all the swooshes in this. It looks really good. So what we can do, yeah, I think I'll just fill it in with some swooshes. So I'm gonna use the lightest color, so the 6. And we're just gonna do a similar swoosh to these ones. So just using the gray or the green tool to make a dot, and we're just trying to get it right in the center of those 2 petals. Okay, and then we'll just go to the next one. Trying to decide, those are like very similar in colors. I think I might skip the 5 and go to the 4. And I think we're just gonna do one more. So I'm gonna make it pretty big, just kind of fill in that space. Oops. pretty. So if you wanted, you could do more of these white walking the dots along the edge here, but I think I'm just gonna leave it as is. I think that looks pretty. I am gonna go add some accents. So I'm gonna take the white and our 2/0 brush. So just a thinner brush. I gotta wait for the center dot to fully dry before we do our top dot, but I want to just add some more white in. This might be hard because everything's wet. I might have to let this dry. Let's see. So I'm just doing top brush strokes. So you don't want to cover the brush stroke. We just want to go do a thin white line right through the center of the brush stroke. So almost like a highlight. This would probably be easier if you let all of this dry first so that you have somewhere to rest your wrist, but for this tutorial, I'm just going for it. I feel like it just really brightens up the center there. You can see the difference between the highlighted ones and the not. So to add a little bit more dimension, I am just gonna grab a silver real quick. Okay, so I'm gonna add some silver accents. So I'm going to use Deco Art's Dazzling Metallic Shimmering Silver. And I'm going to do some top dots. So we just want a tool that is slightly smaller than these dots that we did. So I'm gonna use the 6.5. And I'm just going to do top dots in the center of all these dots. And that will give us some more shine and some dimension. And I'm also gonna grab the large end of the blue tool. And we're just gonna dot on each of these swooshes. Just on the thick part. And I'm gonna add some top brush strokes. So again, just like that highlighting technique. And we're gonna use the silver for this part. So I'm gonna take the silver and the 2/0 brush and just do a top brush stroke. So that when we turn it a little bit, we're getting that nice metallic. And I feel like this top silver brushstroke would look good on either of these two brushstrokes. You could do it on the darker one instead. We more so just want that metallic here for dimension. And then we're gonna do the same thing on this brushstroke here. So I don't know if you can really see these that well on the camera when it's laying flat, but I'll show you. When you tilt it just a bit, see that shimmer makes a big difference. And we are gonna do the same just on these gray ones here. And then our white center dot, and then we're done. Then I'll let this dry for a few hours. And then we can wipe off the guide marks and then add a varnish. So either a white center dot, top dot, or a silver would look good too. You gotta decide which one. So if you're looking at your mandala and if any areas are dark, like that center was a little bit dark compared to like the white on the outside, so those top brush strokes really help just lighten up any areas that are a little on the dark side. I think I want to add some metallic in here. So either on, I think I'll do not the darkest outer ring of dots, but the one right in the, so I'm gonna do just some top dots with the silver, just right in there. And that will also kind of lighten up because those rings are a little bit dark. And just adds more texture and dimension. See how it's just brightening it up. So I'm just using the small end of the blue tool. You just want a tool that is slightly smaller than those dots so that we're not fully covering them. We're just giving them that little top dot accent. Okay, and then we just have to decide if we want to do a white center top dot or silver. I'm leaning towards white, but I just need to look at it from a couple different angles. I don't know, silver might look good in the center as well. I think let's do silver. So I need to pour a little bit more. And we want a tool that is smaller than that center dot. So I'm using the size 8 dotting rod. And that actually looks pretty good. Heck yeah. This turned out gorgeous. I know I said I was done, but now I kind of want to add just the outer dots that I was talking about, but with silver. Let's just see how it looks. I don't know. It's not very cohesive because the rest of those dots are white and these ones are silver. So I'm just gonna wipe it up. It looks okay just with this white space or black space here, but I kind of feel like it needs to be filled in. So maybe we just do the white. Maybe we do smaller than those ones. So use the, yeah, let's just do small details. So let's do the small end of the white tool. Is that too many walking the dots? No, I think that looks good. So we will just finish this pattern by walking all these dots around each gray swoosh pattern that we made. Okay, now we are for real done with the pattern. So I will stop adding to it. Turned out so beautiful. So we're just going to let this dry. So I'll leave it for a couple hours and then I'll come back and we can wipe off the guide marks and then add a varnish and then we are officially done. See you in a minute. Okay, this is now dry, so I'm gonna take a Pampers wet wipe. You can also just use a wet cloth or towel. That might actually be better for this wood because it's more rough, so this will probably get caught on some of those rough spots, but it's not too bad. So we are just wiping off the guide marks. I like to do these little circular motions. The wet wipe is just getting a little caught on some of those rough patches, but I will be sure to get off any little fluffies before we varnish. So the paint shouldn't be coming off. As you can see, there's like a little bit, but not a ton. All right, so now we got our guide marks off. So I'm just gonna let this dry for a second, and then I'm gonna take this outside and use a spray varnish. So we are outside on my patio. I'm gonna be using a spray varnish, and I have this little table, and then I have just this old Zara cardboard that I put underneath. And then I will be using this Krylon Crystal Clear glaze. And I will most likely be using 2 coats. So I am just going to try to do this while also filming. It's kind of difficult. It's a little bit of a windy day today, so. Okay, and then I'm just gonna let it dry. I'm gonna do 1 more coat, and then I'll show you the final result. And here is our final design. All nice and varnished. It turned out beautiful, I think. I hope that you guys enjoyed this tutorial, and if you make this pattern, please tag me on social media. I love seeing your work. All right, we will see you next time.